first, I just want to welcome everyone. I'm Donna Valente. I'm the Vice President of Sales here with SPOL. And on behalf of everyone on my team, I'd like to thank you for your time today and attending the session. I'm going to be the MC and moderate some of the discussion to try to keep us on task, because this is a big topic and there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of content around some of the learning outcomes. But before we get started, I want to add that IE Insights inspiration really was to bring together like-minded people to share, professional excellence in IE through shared education, absent conferences and face-to-face, engagements. I feel like we're missing out on the human dynamic here. So I hope IE Insights is a place where you guys can, network with your peers and attend future sessions. Please look at this as a place for us to, kind of be a community. I've been following some trends in IE, and one of the things that keeps showing up on Listservs is sub change. And I looked at my colleague David, who's going to be one of the guest speakers today, and I was like, this topic should be addressed in a webinar. And so we went out and we solicited some experts, and Aaron Bell of Miami-Dade was one of those experts. And Aaron had a family emergency, so she won't be able to participate today. But I found another expert who's a perfect sub-change person to share some frameworks around IE and sub-change. And I'd like to welcome Ann. She is the Assistant President of Planning in IE and a SACS liaison at Marymount University. And at this time, I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves and give a short background about who they are. And then we're going to jump into the challenges of sub-change and provide some frameworks for you to manage it as effectively as possible. And hopefully you can bring back these learning outcomes to your institution and use them right away. Before I get started, just some housekeeping. I want to add that I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please just shoot them in there, and I will, use a hand signal or my finger to the attendees or verbally interrupt them, and we'll have some your questions addressed throughout. We also are going to leave some time for Q&A, and if we have time at the very end, I'm going to have David show you how SPOL Diamond helps with sub-change compliance and accreditation compliance, and that'll be a short piece. So without further ado, I'd like to have Ann, you introduce yourself, and David, then you can introduce yourself, and we'll jump right in. How's that sound, folks?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Boudinot. I'm Assistant Vice President for Planning and Institutional Effectiveness and the liaison for SACS COC at Marymount University. We're in Arlington, Virginia, in the Metro DC area. I've been in assessment planning, institutional effectiveness for many, many, many years. I was in Egypt for a very long time at the American University in Cairo before Marymount. And we were a Middle States university. We had 2 reaffirmation cycles while I was there, midterm reviews, many sub changes, including for the revolution. And we got out of all of those pretty well. And at Marymount, when I came to Marymount, we were just starting the reaffirmation process. We went through that very well. SACS COC was a change for me. Weathered that. Our QEP was fine. And since then, I'm sure, like many of you, we've been submitting an awful lot of sub changes. So I'm very glad to be here, and I hope that this webinar will be conversational. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat or the Q&A, and Donna will be moderating those questions. We can stop at any time and answer them.
Actually, you're right. The Q&A is probably the better spot for the questions than the chat. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
David, you're on.
Sure. I'm David Mosley. I'm the subject matter expert in institutional effectiveness at SPOL. I have 32 years in higher education, 10 years at a comprehensive university, Lamar University, and 22 years at Lamar Institute of Technology, where I sat in the seat of the institutional effectiveness coordinator and grants. And then the last 5 years was the Vice President for Strategic Initiatives. In addition, for 22 years, I was the institutional accreditation liaison before it was even a title, taking our school through initial candidacy, initial accreditation, multiple reaffirmations, multiple fifth years, multiple successful QEPs, and countless sub changes. And so I know the fear and trepidation that any change to the policy, all 67 pages of it, can cause. And I look forward to having a discussion with everybody on the group.
We're going to drop a poll into the chat. If it should pop up on your screen. If you could just answer that, we'd like to get a sense of who's in the room. So thank you for that. And go ahead, you can keep going there, Anne.
Sure. These are the learning outcomes. I think that you had a chance to read them in the run up to the webinar. But like I said, this is really just a chance to talk about some ways we have discovered of trying to manage the chaos of subchange using just whatever tools that we have in the office, as well as some more sophisticated tools and software. But basically, it's just, how we can set ourselves up to succeed in managing subchanges. And I know that you all have a lot of experience with this, and I'd be very happy to hear about what good ideas you have that have worked at your universities. Donna,
Awesome.
did you want to say anything about these learning outcomes?
No, I think, this is what we hope that we let you walk away with, and we just want you to be as engaged as possible to, reacting to the frameworks that you're going to offer.
First, we wanted to set up the conversation by talking about just what's been going on in the last few years. I haven't even mentioned COVID here. It's a common denominator. I think we all know the impact of COVID at our universities and what that's meant in terms of our compliance with accreditation standards. Certainly, there have been a lot of items we've had to deal with in terms of our remaining compliant. And at least from a SAC-COC perspective, I think that the accrediting agencies have worked very well with us. Other than COVID, they've had the changes by the Department of Education in 2019 that took effect in July 2020 that have resulted in some changes in the requirements for how accrediting agencies oversee their member institutions. That's changed some of the subchange requirements. Reducing some of the reporting requirements, increasing some of the reporting requirements. There have been tremendous market pressures as universities approach that demographic cliff. So most universities are facing increasing competition, not just from their peers, but also from new players in the market like Google and Amazon that are offering new ways of gaining skills and knowledge other than just the traditional college experience. We have employers who are not necessarily looking as closely as they did for that four-year degree, valuing competencies increasingly rather than the four-year degree or in addition to the four-year degree. And so that has changed things. We have that demographic cliff that's coming toward us in 2026, and we're already experiencing declines in the traditional first time in college enrollment, increases in graduate and non-traditional student enrollment. There's an increasing demand for wherever, whenever students are access to programming, increasing pressure on budgets. Marymount, where I work, is a very tuition dependent university. So whenever we have issues with enrollment, that has an immediate impact on our budget. And I think a lot of universities like Marymount experience that as well. And as a result of a lot of these things, universities are scrambling to think anew about how they offer programming and what they offer and to whom they offer it. Universities are cutting programs, they're restructuring programs, they're pulling them apart and offering new instructional modalities online, hybrid stackable certificates, mini masters, mini degrees. And so things are changing very quickly, and all of those have impact on our accreditation and on how we ask for approval of those arrangements. There's also a growing interest in resource sharing agreements, like the lower cost models for Independent Colleges Consortium, for online content providers, as well as platform providers. So all of those will have impacts on enrollment and on our relationship with our accreditors. These are just reminding you of some of the general requirements that we have as universities for our accrediting agencies, regardless of which one we belong to. We're required to notify them or to secure approval from them prior to implementing a lot of other changes. We're responsible for tracking and maintaining compliance with all of the policies of the accreditors to remain compliant with all of the accreditation standards. We're required to have written policies and procedures approved and implemented and published. And then we're required to notify accreditors and have written teach-out plans for programs. If you're on any kind of substantive change restriction, if you're on any kind of probation, you need to have those written teach-out plans.
So, Anne, one of the things that I heard one of our colleagues mention was that there's really no, the accrediting bodies aren't giving you the how-tos, like the requirements that they have aren't like specific. So how are you, like, for example, the tracking and maintaining compliance, how are you managing that if they're not really giving you specific what they need?
So they give you general guidelines, but it's up to the university to decide whether or not something constitutes a substantive change. You need to show a process that you have made that decision, the reasons why you made that decision, and that you acted accordingly. And you need to keep a record of that, so that when you are up for a midterm review or a reaffirmation and the question comes up, you can explain why you did what you did and it makes sense. There are a lot of ways. We're going to talk about some of those ways in the coming slides, but there are a lot of resources out there where people ask the questions. Nobody's born knowing all of these things. And I think even some of the accreditation agencies are working through new things, these stackable credentials and new consortial relationships, these are all very complex and new. So we have to think about what they mean and what the implications are. And to remember that these standards in accreditation agencies, all of the accreditation agency standards are designed around student success. So to what extent do these changes impact our students? And I think as long as we keep that in mind, that will help direct our analysis of different changes.
And I would just add to that a lot of the regional accreditors have a portal that tracks, but it's interesting that in the SAC-COC portal, they now tell you you're assigned an ID for a particular sub change. It doesn't have any of the backup information that Anne was mentioning as to the rationale, the impact on the institution. So I think they're trying to move, the accreditors are moving in that direction, but at the current iteration, particularly at SACs, all you have is just a tracking that this occurred and here's the title of it and it was approved or disallowed. So I think,
yeah.
Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, SACs also, and again, I'm speaking from a SAC-COC perspective, but they also give you, some rather firm guidance that you should keep records. So you should have some record of your analysis of a particular change and why you decided what you did.
And I find it interesting that on the institutional summary form, they ask you to tell them of all the changes that have occurred since the last decennial. And so if you don't have that ability to track, you're not going to be able to answer that on the institutional summary form, which is part of your decennial reaffirmation.
And I think, all of us, as we come into new positions and look at historical decisions, we can see there were some oopsies, where things probably should have gone through subchange and didn't. So I think, like I said, I'm very careful to keep records of why we did what we did, including copies of any conversations I had with the accrediting agency about, a particular teach out or a particular, subchange.
Anybody have any questions or, anything to add to this, this slide?
Well, while you're collecting those, I thought it was interesting, Anne, as we were preparing, you had kind of mentioned that programs don't ever die, they just kind of fade away, right? And they morph into something else, which can create all kinds of subchange challenges with presidents who want to modify programs, and when does that trigger notification or actual prospecti?
Yeah, I think it was, who was it? Was it Robert Dickinson once told the audience in a presentation he was giving that if you want to have an eternal life, come back as an academic program. Yeah, I think it's very hard for universities to close programs. But SAC-COC, at least, again, has enumerated things that in the past they hadn't, including, the percentage of change in a program that would trigger either a notification or an approval, reduction or increase in the number of credit hours that would trigger either a notification or approval. So that's been very helpful for us, that they have added some specifics that were missing in the past.
All right, so are we ready to move to the next content piece?
And here we are. That was a great segue. These are some common triggers for substantive change. And I think this, again, is across accrediting agencies. So offering courses at higher or lower degree levels, adding programs that are a significant departure from existing programs. I think in the past, people thought that this meant that the zip code was different, but actually the guidance now is that it's about resources. So if you're offering new courses, new curricula that require new library resources, new faculty, then that's really what the trigger is. And at least in SACs, they've delineated what we all sort of had as a rule of thumb in the past, but now they put it in writing. So that's been very helpful. Adding additional delivery methods of delivery to current programs, entering cooperative arrangements. And these are especially common now as people look at these consortial relationships. They look at online content providers and things like that. Increasing or decreasing clock or credit hours, competency-based, any degree completion program. So any program that relies on previously existing experience or competencies is now triggers a subchange. Dual or joint academic awards, closing program, and the list is longer than this. I just picked out ones that I thought were probably most common at universities.
Sure, and when you see words like substantially, which for the IE brain, it wants a number. What is your threshold when you consider the idea of substantially increasing or decreasing clock or credit hours? Are you?
Well, SAC-COC has now put a number on that,
right.
And I think if I remember correctly, it's 25%.
That's right. Yeah, and I so thank them for that, because before you'd scratch your head and go, well, is 20 too much, or is it 50?
Yeah, I mean, when I started this, they hadn't delineated it, but it was kind of a commonly known rule of thumb for the changes. And what's a significant departure was if it was 25% new content or faculty or whatever. And now it's been raised to 50% requiring approval, and 25%, 25 to 49% is just a notification.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on. So now that we've set sort of the foundation for this conversation, how can we identify when institutional changes can trigger a notification or the submission of a formal prospectus? So again, this is the institution's responsibility, and we just need to make sure that we keep track and that we have a policy, we have a business process, and we keep a log of all of those decisions. And again, I supplement the log with copies of any kind of correspondence. As institutions discuss all of these changes that they want to make, one of the, I think one of the best practices is to make sure that the accreditation liaison is, to borrow a phrase, in the room where it happens. As much as possible to have the liaison be part of those conversations so they can give people a heads up, so they know what's coming down the pike. I think the worst thing that can happen is for the liaison to be surprised by something, or to find out that something has already happened that needed prior approval. SAC-COC, at least I don't think they mind an occasional oops, but they certainly don't want it to be a common occurrence. And if it is, that could trigger something like a deeper level of review, which is not something that you would want to happen. So they require that you have a policy, they require that you have a process that is implemented and followed, and that you're keeping track of these decisions.
So, Anne, let me ask you, at your institution, what are the, if you had to group them, what are the most common sources for notifications or prospecti? Would you say it comes from academic departments making changes to programs and awards, since everything is award-based? Would you say it's?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's almost entirely academic affairs. And so it's coming out of changes that are being led by the deans of the colleges. So I sit on the academic leadership. I'm part of the Academic Leadership Council. I attend all of the faculty council meetings. I am part, as ex officio, I'm part of the academic planning, budgeting, and policy committee of faculty council that has to approve new programs. And I lurk on the undergraduate and graduate curriculum committees to make sure that I am very much in part of those conversations.
And that was my experience as well. At my institution, I sat on the curriculum review, and that would be our first line of defense as curricular changes came through the lowest level. Departments could plan all they wanted, but they had to bring them to curriculum review for approval. And that would be where the accreditation liaison, I would try to determine, based on what I was hearing, whether it was a notification. And again, these timelines are so far out, right? Marymount uses what, a year out for a prospectus?
We tell them it will take a year, but of course, people want things done as quickly as possible. So the approval timeframe internally is quite short now. We try to expedite that as much as possible, because we understand that the approval process will take a year. It takes 6 months, but for implementation, it's a year. And so if you're part of those conversations, you can sometimes help them understand the implications of what they're doing, to the extent that, they can alter their path. So instead of doing something that would not let them implement a program for a year, they can think about ways that it could be done sooner than that, if you're part of the conversation.
Right, and I think that's important, is because as you work with the end in mind, those long timelines for SACS notification in June or late December, right? For the next following year, you have to back it up with your board of trustees or your system approval and your internal processes. And like you said, a lot of times what we would do is we would do a notification to get the ball rolling,
right?
Because we hadn't met that threshold yet, and then follow it up with a prospectus within the time frame, and that seemed to work very well. Because you're right, you don't want to be the naysayer. You want to, kind of like we had on the front slide about Socrates, is don't focus on the change itself. Focus on what you can do, the new stuff that you can actually accomplish. And when the president wants it, there's usually a lot of more. There's quite a bit more impetus to make the change.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that reputation as a partner in success is really important. I think that a lot of times liaisons can be viewed as, as an obstacle, as the naysayer, the one who always puts the kibosh on what we want to do. And I think it's very important that you try very hard not to get that reputation, to get the reputation as someone who will work with you to make sure that you succeed. So to say, I'm not saying no to what you want to do, but I'm telling you, you can't really do it that way, that you need to do it this way. And if you do it this way, then we'll be able to get it approved quickly.
Exactly. That's well said.
All right, folks, we have about, it's 1:01, so we have about 20 minutes. Okay, I will speed up. The last point is really important. If you have a question, just ask. That's why your vice president, your accreditation vice president, is there. The sub-change office of your accrediting agency is where all of the expertise lies too. They're always very happy to answer your questions. We have listservs for the accrediting agencies. I know SAC-COC has ACSHE, it's ACCSHE, and it's been enormously helpful as I've thought through things to ask for people's experience. It's a great way to network and to gain sort of partners who have institutions facing the same kind of things you do. And then you can ask also colleagues, ask the question, find out what other people have done, because most likely whatever problem you're facing, someone else has also faced it. These are some practical ways that you can create support systems to help you. Again, reinforcing that you should be part of the academic leadership, part even of what goes on at the cabinet level. Make sure to the extent possible that whatever your academic business processes are, that they give you a leg up on submitting a sub-change. So for example, for the new program new program approval process, the template for doing that at Marymount mirrors the requirements for the prospectus. So once the school completes that, I generally have all the information I need to submit the sub-change. Make sure people are updating faculty rosters each semester. They're updating the required credentials to teach in a program. Make sure that all programs, that the oversight of the program has not slipped and that the person who is overseeing the program has the appropriate qualifications. Make sure you have CVs on file and they're updated. To the extent possible, encourage academic planning. I think universities are very good at strategic plans, but I think the academic plan can sometimes fall away and people get in a reactive phase. So the more that schools and colleges can plan ahead of what kind of programming they want to offer, the sooner you're going to have the information you need to determine whether or not something needs approval. Keep minutes. You don't want to get in the position where you have to go scramble to find something. So have your committees keep minutes, make sure that all kinds of decisions at the university are being documented and that the chairs of those committees are keeping copies in a specified location. For us, our faculty council uses Canvas. So they have a faculty council site and all of the decisions and the approvals and everything are filed in that Canvas site. And then just communicate, make sure that people are aware of what the changes are, what the requirements are, communicate, train, create a website and put everything up on a website, as much as possible, make sure that the information is there and easily available for people. To save time, again, if you can have a template, for example, for new program proposals, that's wonderful. Give people examples of successful
sub-change documents for things that they're thinking about doing, so they understand what kind of information is needed. We've created budget worksheets, so people just have to plug in, projected enrollment numbers, and the, a standard cost will pop out. We have created sample market analyses and added source links to like the Bureau of Labor Statistics so that they can easily find the information. And my office, Planning and Institutional Effectiveness, helps conduct some of that research for them. So again, we're a partner in their success. And then you can create standard language for sections that are common across proposals. For us, the university assessment processes is common language, student services, common language, online student support, common language. So you can create that language and then again, make it available to people who are preparing proposals. So they just pop it in.
Quick question from
Sure.
Lisa. She's new to substantive change, and is there any recommendations for listservs that she can join or monitor?
Well, again, I can only speak about SAC-COC. Their listserv is called ACSHE. It's ACCSHE. So I would recommend reaching out to your particular accrediting agency and seeing if they have a listserv. I can also tell you that the AIR has a listserv, the Association for Institutional Research, and most of those people are IE offices that are handling accreditation, so they would be able to also guide you to any kind of listservs for your particular accreditor. There's another one called Assess for assessment professionals, and again, they're usually IE offices, so they would be also able to help you.
And I put the ASHE listserv address in to answer Lisa.
Great. So, software is going to be able to help you do a lot of these things. And it can help you keep track. It can help you mitigate some of the changes of personnel and processes. It can provide a template to facilitate common content creation around, particularly these areas. And, you have the range of content or software that you can use. For example, you can look at what you currently have. I use Google a lot because it's accessible to everyone, easily accessible to everyone. We have faculty activity tracking software that we're just implementing now, and that will help with credentialing and the storage of CVs. Curriculum management software, we've also just adopted that, and we created the template again for the program approval process that mirrors the SAC-COC perspective template. So again, it makes everything very easy. We use Canvas for faculty council, so all of those decisions and minutes and everything are stored there. And that seems to work very well for us. It's an intensive, not coordinated process, but I'm able to find the documents with the software that we currently have. There are specialized software out there for accreditation that can also provide you with a bit more sophisticated approach. And I think David will talk to you about that at the end of the presentation. This is an example of what I do in my office. It's just an Excel sheet. And this is our decision log. So as people mention the idea of a new program, I enter it into the log and make it red until I have more information and can determine whether or not something is going to actually be a sub change requiring notification. So I went back as far as our, as the current records that I have. So this goes back to 2017, and it's several pages long now. But it will provide information on everything that we talked about at the university and why we did or didn't submit a substantive change. I also have a similar log for any correspondence that I've had with SAC-COC. I have a log of our off-campus instructional sites. And not even the ones, not just the ones that, that require approval, but even if we have a dual enrollment program with a particular high school, I'll enter that information as well. And I have a list of all of our active programs compared to the active programs in our last reaffirmation, so that I can make sure that whatever we talked about in 2018, that we have an explanation for what happened to it in 2021 or 2028 when we do our next reaffirmation, and that every new program or every non-existing, a program that fell out, that there's been an approval for that change. And that's really all I wanted to talk about today. So I'm happy to answer any of your questions. And I'm going to turn this over to David to talk about a unified software project that will help you with all of this.
Thank you, Ann. And in my experience, so you've been at Marymount for what, 5-6 years?
Yeah, 7.
And you've done a great job of organizing all of this information and being able to pull information from the past. And I guess I was a little bit unique in that I was in my position for 22 years and I was the only SACS accreditation liaison the school had ever had. And I don't think that's the case for most of the folks in the room. So one of the things that Diamond by SPOL does is it provides that institutional repository that regardless of previous cycles or personnel changes, the information lives in the cloud in a single place. The software is what we call accreditation agnostic. So it works in all the regional accreditors and all the different programmatic accreditors. And it allows you to store your responses and your prospecti in the cloud, so that if you were to leave the institution, all this great work lives on your shared drive, and hopefully the school's smart enough to back that up. But you really never know, right? I'm not sure how long it took you to gather all that back data, but imagine having in a single place all of your previous prospectuses and all of your decisions and documents in a single repository. And that's kind of that unifying organizing principle that Donna likes to talk about. And I would just, if people are interested in seeing a demo, I think there's going to be an opportunity to submit your information so that you could see something that could serve your institution, not just for an immediate need, but over time, create that continuity of compliance, which I think is so critical with the high stakes that we're in today.
Yeah, one of the things that, I saw the spreadsheet and somebody said, oh, they want the PowerPoint presentation because they love the idea of that spreadsheet. My first reaction was, holy moly, what happens if you leave?
Yeah. Well, we're using Box right now. So I have a big Box library in my account. So the difference is you sort of have to know what you're looking for. It's not organized in this way. And so, I love this idea. It would certainly be easier than what I have, but for those people who don't have the software, having some kind, even in your IE office, having something that's not on your personal computer. So having it in a shared drive, everything organized, again, it's that record keeping process. I've talked to so many people who said, they needed to cite something or they needed to, respond to something and they couldn't find it. And, it just makes me shudder. You need to have a repository of everything related to accreditation. And in our office, we're responsible. So we have that in our Box server.
So in your 7 years,
this might be, I'm sorry, David.
I was just going to say, in your 7 years, how many sub-change prospecti and notifications do you think you've been responsible for?
Oh, I'm picturing the drive in my head. Certainly the pace has picked up in the last 3 years.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's a long list now, but I think it was a slower pace up until maybe 2016.
That was my experience as well. I had over 75 sub changes, of which I had 20 prospecti. And like you said, the pace has really quickened in the last 3 to 5 years. And with the changes, it will only do so. I'm
So
sorry, Don.
it's around 11:15, 1:15, and I don't see any questions coming in. I'd love to hear some feedback from you all about, what you just learned, but this might be a perfect opportunity, David, to segue into showing them how we help manage sub-change compliance. Would everybody, like to maybe see the, 8 minutes or 10 minutes of how we help with managing all this this paper and shared drives and these changes? Somebody said we got one yes. I'll take that as a collective yes.
I
David,
would.
why don't you just start showing us? I think it'll be very fascinating. I think people will be pleasantly surprised and relieved that there's something to help them that's very affordable right now.
So everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Diamond product by Skoll, and we are organized around 5 different modules: planning, budgeting, assessment, faculty credentials, and accreditation. And the accreditation piece in particular is based on a template, whether that is HLC or SACS or programmatic accreditation like ABET, you name it, and we have the template, right? Because again, this Diamond serves as that repository. So you can see where we've loaded the SACS COC substantive change prospectus template, and you're able to, one of the nice things is that you're able to select the template, give it an accreditation cycle, give it an end date, because we know everything's due in December for the next year, right? And here is the powerful thing. You can either start with a new baseline if it was something that you didn't have a point of reference for before, or you can actually choose anything that had been submitted before. So that common, back to the common narrative piece, you're able to select the narrative, the response. If SACS gave you a response, if you respond, when you do the sub-change process with SACS, they are going to they're assign it to a reader, and that reader is going to usually have some questions, right? Unless you're just, top of class and you did it perfectly, which is unusual. So you're able to include any of the sections that you have used in the past, and that speaks to the continuity of thought and common content that is so important. And then once you select those sections that you want to include, you're able to pick and choose any of the different sections for the abstract. And again, this looks like the template, right? And then you publish it, and you can assign it to individuals on your campus to work on that particular section, and it can follow your approval process. So Anne, at your school, when you're working on a sub change, what is your approval process? Do you have a 3-person approval, or can it vary? You're muted.
Sorry, my dog was barking. Approval of the sub change, or approval of the whatever's causing the sub change?
Well, the prospectus. When you're submitting a prospectus, you follow a provost, IAL president.
Send it directly to the president.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the Diamond allows you to set up a workflow that can facilitate approvals. It's an electronic workflow process, so that when you have, let's say you have an academic department that's wanting to make a change, you could assign them a piece to write some of that contextual narrative, and then it would pick it up and envelop it into the common content that your office provided around those common content areas that we talked about earlier, as far as background and context, faculty qualifications, resources made up of library and learning resources, student support services, and financial resources, and then the institutional evaluation and assessment piece. So that would then be picked up and packaged and And then once you're finished, it's published, you would be able to actually I'm having to tell it I don't want to do what I said I wanted to do. And so you would actually then allow the individuals to work on them, and you would review it. It would be approved, and then you would be notified as the accreditation liaison that the work had been done, or you would notice that people hadn't been working on it, and you would be able to quickly fire off an email to say, you know, waiting on a mission statement, waiting on something, and be able to keep the process going without necessarily having to, you know, harangue people to complete their piece. So that's pretty much it. It's very simple. That repository lives and is available and only viewable by the individuals that need to see the information, right? So it's permission based. So you could have a permission based system where your department chair could see it. They would be the only ones. Provost, IE folks, or the president could see everything. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And we'd be happy to, you know, follow up with any questions that anyone had.
Did nobody have their coffee today?
They're busy answering the polls.
Chad is asking, I do have a question regarding tracking for need to submit a sub change. Was this going to David, Chad, or did you want Ann to answer that one?
Chad's raising his hand.
Maybe we should let him talk. How can we get him to raise his hand? Oh, I just raised my hand.
I'll click on Chad to let him. I think we can allow him to talk. So if you unmute Chad, you can talk now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't. The question's a little lengthy, so I didn't want to put it in the chat. That'd just be easier to ask. This is really for Ann, but David, feel free to jump in as well. My institution, where we use HLC as our institutional accreditor, but similar to what you were talking about, you know, they do quantify the percentage of change in a course that or program that might require a substantive change. And the challenge that we are having in terms of tracking changes, our faculty love to make changes in courses.
Yes.
And it's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so we are designing these massive, complex Excel spreadsheets semester by semester of every single change since the previous approval, and trying to figure out, okay, if you change a course outcome or you change a block of content, how much of a percentage of change is that, so that we can over time add, okay, there was a 2% change here and then a 3% change here and a 1% change there, and boom, 2 years later, we now have 30% change from the original course. I mean, it's almost an exercise in futility. And in talking with other schools in our region, they're all pulling their hair out to try to figure out how to actually operationalize this. Are you experiencing that with your institution? Have you heard about a silver bullet that would make this process much more easy?
No.
Okay.
No.
The short answer.
I honestly, I don't think that I look at it that way, and I might be wrong in that, but at the individual course level, I think I would almost follow the program level. Is it 25%? Is it 50%? If it's less than 25%, I'm not worried about it. And things that happen over time also, I don't know that I would worry so much about it. There's a lot of things that happen organically in our courses, and I don't know that that would rise to the level of a substantive change. I worry much more about the program level. So I try to help our deans and our associate deans and our school directors to understand this process. So, I lurk at the curriculum committees, and if I see that, that they're revising a program by changing, substantially changing course content, that would raise a flag for me. If they're just tweaking courses, I guess I'm not that concerned about it. And I don't know if that's the right approach, but that's my approach.
I think, yeah. And as far as HLC and SACs, it's based on the award, right? So if you're offering a certificate that's 12 or 15 semester credit hours, it doesn't take very many course changes within that award to trigger a notification or a prospectus. And this is kind of like, and Chad, I so appreciate it. It's like three-dimensional chess, because it's not just curricular changes. It's how are you offering it? Are you doing it in an online format for the first time? Is it off campus? Is it an off-campus instructional site? Those kind of changes can catch you pretty quick. But I don't think at the internal to the course, computer science is a great one. We had a computer networking program that was constantly changing to keep up with the technology. And so they were constantly switching out more than 25% of an award. We notified at that point. If it was more than 25, it was above 49, we would actually do a sub change prospectus. Yeah. So I wouldn't so much worry about the internal to the course. It's more, to me, is what is changing with the award, the way it's being taught, and where it's being taught.
I appreciate that, and I might have misspoken. We, for example, we may have a graduate program with maybe 10 courses in it. All 10 courses are changing. So it's not just a tweak here and a course, a tweak there, But when all courses are changing, or when the accreditation standards change for the specialty, there are programmatic changes. So, you have enough course changes, it leads to programmatic change. And, I like the analogy you said of a three-dimensional chess game. It really is that. And I know at our institution, I think that's beyond our curriculum committee. And so we're really trying to figure out who has the time to devote the mental energy and, tracking of all the moving parts that go on. It's a challenge we haven't quite figured out yet. We're working hard at it, but hopefully the accreditors will be patient with institutions in trying to figure out really how to keep track of what's going on in their programs at this micro level.
Yeah, and I think the more that we can, sort of follow the new, I don't know if you've read the new AIR guidelines for institutional research offices, but the more that we can empower the people that we work with, our deans and our associate deans and our curriculum committee chairs, the more that we can, empower them with the information they need to help, help catch those things. I think the easier our task becomes. As I work at a small university, we have 3,000 students, so I can't begin to imagine what it's like to work at a very complex university. I have enough trouble just, herding my own cats. But, I think if we can, the more that we can make people aware that, you can do this, but if you do this, then this becomes a thing, the easier our job will be.
Yeah, and I think, and what you had said earlier is exactly what their accreditors are looking for, is do you have a policy, and are you at least attempting to follow that policy, and what's your process for capturing change? And there, as long as you have that infrastructure piece, they're going to be a lot more understanding than if you just willy-nilly, keep saying oops about sub change, because that really does get their attention, and you may find yourself on the receiving end of a special committee visit.
Yeah.
So we have about a minute left. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions? Want to share some best practices? We'd love to hear it.
I would also just highlight again that the accreditation liaison needs to have a very visible presence on campus. They need to be empowered by the president. People need to listen when they talk. And their responsibility is to make sure that people are aware. And, that can be, by pushing out information as well.
Excellent. All right, folks. Well, I want to thank you again for your time. We're at the bottom of the hour, and I invite you to contact me and David if you're interested in learning more about SPOL and how we could support you with accreditation and sub-change compliance. My contact information is D Valente, that's V as in Victor, ALENTE at spol.com. And David, you can
Putting it
type in the chat there your information as well.
Yes,
and we hope that you enjoyed today's webinar and this session. Anne, I'd like to thank you so much for your time and your thoughts and your expertise. And folks, let's see, there's a couple things coming in the chat here.
Just wanted to show you our emails.
What's that?
I pulled up the presentation to provide
okay.
our email addresses.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. All right. Anything else, folks?